Joining me now to discuss is Senior Director of Government Affairs at the National Taxpayers Union, Tommy Aiello. Welcome back, Tommy.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
All right, so what do you make of this latest win for President Trump?
Yeah, it's certainly a big deal. I think it's the largest trade deal in U.S. history, possibly world history. So that's very good news. And look, we avoid the escalation of a trade war. And I think that was the whole point of these negotiations. The negotiations were set to wrap up by Friday. Otherwise, Europe would be hit with a 30% tariff. So it needed to happen. They're our largest trading partner. We export about $800 billion worth of manufactured goods as well as digital services, right? These are things from aircraft from South Carolina, alcohol from places like Kentucky and Wisconsin, and then a whole bunch of other technological goods from places like New York and California. So it's good that we have the certainty, and I think small businesses on both sides of the Atlantic will be breathing a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend who they have a shoe company and it's wildly popular. They're designer women's shoes, mostly Italian made. And he was saying that the tariffs are killing their business, but they need a tariff deal with Italy. So I'm imagining Italy falls within the EU. This means they are free to have their shoes shipped back and forth without the terrible tariffs. And so this is a great deal for small business owners, as you mentioned, but I want to kind of pick your brain, Tommy, for responses. You might be on Facebook. I saw this over the weekend and I was so annoyed because I hate it when people do these big, long book length dissertations of lies on Facebook on a Sunday where I'm trying to, like, why I'm on Facebook. I don't know, Tommy, it's a whole nother conversation, but I'm trying to relax on the weekend. I want to fight you on Facebook Monday through Friday. I don't want to fight you on Sunday. I had a friend who is a political commentator post a big, long diatribe about how the EU deal, the Europeans get nothing out of it, and America gets everything out of it. It's basically settler colonialism in the form of trade, and that we're hurting our cohorts in Europe. And I was like, well, they don't have to worry about Russia turning off their energy in the dead of winter because they won't be relying on Russia for LNG anymore. So they do get a lot out of this deal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm looking at this deal from two perspectives. One, what we know, what we don't know. One, we know the EU is going to be purchasing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of energy. That could be things like LNG, crude oil, coal. The details are still scant on what that means. And then we also know American manufacturers are going to pay 0% in tariffs, which is a very good sign. Now, we don't know the other details. We don't know if they're going to drop their digital services taxes and their crusade against American technology companies. We also don't know what some of the non-tariff barriers might look like. Now, on this side of the Atlantic, there's still going to be a 15% across the board tariff rate. That means American consumers will be paying a 15% tax on things like pharmaceuticals, alcohol, and other goods that are produced in Europe but sold here. That's the not so good about it. We know that these tariffs, one, are going to be paid by importers when they come through our ports, and then eventually they're going to be passed along to consumers. So we'll have to see the details as they're finalized, but I'm not jumping up and down for this big trade deal. It's better than the alternative where we have 30% tariffs, but I really hope we should get to a place where we have zero tariffs on both sides of the Atlantic.
So I would love that too. But the tariff imbalance, the trade imbalance is, with Europe. So I saw a chart where it showed that when President Trump was in office the first time, there have always been trade imbalances, but they were so much smaller. They tripled with Canada and Europe. They almost doubled the amount of trade imbalance. So it really, I find it hard to believe, but it really relies a lot on who's in the presidency, how bad these trade imbalances get. And you would think that would be much more a function of Congress, but it's the executive branch that creates these deals because the cabinet members all belong to the executive branch. Tommy, help us understand why that's so true. When Democrats are in office, the trade imbalances are so much larger.
Yeah, part of it is a function of our manufacturing system. Typically, when we have periods of high inflation, high energy costs, high labor costs, it's very difficult for American manufacturers to produce here. So I think one thing that we're seeing under President Trump is certainty. We passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, which included a number of tax provisions that will stay permanent. And then we're also going to see a number of pro-growth tax provisions that'll help manufacturers produce here. That way they don't have to worry about a tax increase at the end of the year. We're also going to see a deregulatory agenda from this administration that was the complete opposite from the last one. Deregulation means that we take the shackles off of businesses. They're able to produce here and sell abroad. And then finally, energy dominance. The last administration went after fossil fuel companies, which raise energy prices. We all feel it at our homes and our apartments, but it's compounded really for manufacturers. Energy is one of the largest input costs for manufacturers here. So anytime you're significantly raising the cost of energy, you're very much raising the cost of producing here. So hopefully when you take all of those factors into account, we'll be able to not only create more factories here, but produce more goods that we can sell abroad.
So I love that. And I really appreciate you being able to explain that, because I think what ends up happening is, obviously there's latest polling out from Harry Enton over at CNN talking about how Americans trust President Trump still to this day by points. Like, we're talking about an 8-point spread over the Democrats. And I think that was bolstered by, again, the Iranian strike and the two sets of African nations on the continent of Africa. These two nations were warring, and now they're at peace. And President Trump brought those about. Those weren't even promised. These are like bonuses. Like, if you get extra mints on your pillow at the hotel, you didn't even want those. The 2 bottles of water, you didn't know you were getting those. So these are bonuses. But there's even more at play here. And that is, if Americans continue to trust President Trump, it bodes poorly for the Democrats in the midterm, but it is a great, fantastic predictor for business and GDP by extension, et cetera. So it's like a snowball going downhill of goodness for a change.
Yeah, it really is good news. Like I said, businesses large and small, they need certainty whenever they want to deploy their capital here in America. Whether it's a small business wanting to expand to another location or a large manufacturer wanting to invest tens of billions of dollars into a factory here. So they need that certainty. We got that with the tax cuts. Now, with the trade deal, we're still going to be paying that 15% tax rate. That's not great. It's about 10 times it was when President Trump took office. So we'll have to see how that adds into the GDP figures. There's a Fed meeting this week, and I think with that clarity, we could be set for rate cuts this year, potentially more than one. But as we look at the data going into this week, I'm not certain that we'll see rate cuts at the Fed from this week.
So that's not as good, but I think all of us are kind of sitting, and it's not like how you wait for Christmas where you're like literally almost out of breath. It's more like, okay, we're settling in. We know there's a bad blood between the two of them, and we're just going to have to put up with it. NTU, it's at NTU on X. We love your work. Thank you so much, Tommy Aiello, for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. And when we